Hello, in this segment about R, I'm going to show you how to download RStudio, and know the basic features of RStudio in terms of being able to do your homework assignments and getting a feel for R, as most of you in this class are new to R and to some syntax programs as well. For those who already are familiar with R, hopefully this is a review. Or maybe you can also learn some new things as well. So to get started, we're going to go to Google and we're going to type in R. And if you type in R, the first thing that will pop up is the R Project for Statistical Computing. And if we click on that, they'll give us the main page of the R website. We're going to go to Download CRAN. And then you're going to go to the United States or the country where you're located, as it usually takes faster in terms of downloading and also in terms of language and updates as well. From the United States, you can choose the one closest to you. I tend to use Berkeley only because they tend to keep their updates regular. So what do I mean by that? In terms of each website, so California, Berkeley versus like Case or Duke, have their own image of R that they update. And some universities or institutions are better at updating their their images of R than others. And so that's why I tend to use Berkeley. But you can also use like Revolutionary Analytics, which is sort of the main company behind the open source R, which is free on this version that we're going to be using shortly. So if we click on this, then you're going to choose the system from which you want to download R. I'm using Windows platform, so I'll choose that. And then for most of you, it's going to be installing R for the first time, and so you're going to go to install R for the first time, and then it will give you the version, and then you're going to hit download, and you can download from there. And it'll take some time. You'll follow through in terms of the instructions, which they also provide up here, in terms of how to proceed forward. In those situations, it's pretty straightforward in terms of loading it, and they'll always give you instructions in terms of how to go about downloading it. If you're doing it in Word, once this has loaded, it'll be a point and click to go through the process, and they have a default setting if you don't want to modify anything. And so you can, have the basic default package of R. You must install R before you install RStudio. So the next step would then be to go and type into Google RStudio. And then if you go to RStudio Home, and I'm going to cancel this so it doesn't take up space. Then if you go to RStudio, it will show you RStudio, Shiny, and R packages. Now RStudio is going to be, this is a little bit confusing in terms of how they set it up. So usually for download purposes I use the home page, but it'll tell you all the different options that are available in RStudio. So desktop, server, because they have now commercial licenses, so if you need to do more extensive package creation and things of that nature, it'll allow you to do that as well. And so they tell you all the different options that they have available, security and things of that nature. Shiny is the interactive app within R. So if you want to create a dashboard, which is very popular right now, particularly in marketing, you can do that using Shiny. and connect that with your different R syntaxes and R markdowns to create an interactive visualization with widgets where you can, change numbers or let your audience, change, cities or, variables to make different, geo, spatial, or even just maps and other types of um, scatter plots and graphs. Now, in class it was asked, how do we know which packages that we need to use? So RStudio, this is not all inclusive, but these are the most common ones, and they have provided them here. As we go through class, I will let you know for the multivariate statistics which ones are important or that you need in order to do the multivariate statistics that we're covering. But these are a list of the popular ones through RStudio. And we'll cover some of those shortly. We'll see within RStudio, once we've downloaded it, how we can get to the RStudio cheat sheets. I'm going to provide this link up online as this is sort of more updated in terms of all the different cheat sheets that RStudio provides. So back to downloading RStudio, we're going to go to the home page and we're going to go to download RStudio. And for our purposes and for most of what you'll be doing, unless you needed something highly secure and at a higher commercial level for your company, you can use the download of the free option. And then you're going to select the package based on your platform. So in this case, I'm going to be using Windows. And so then it would download, and then yet again, there's going to be point and click options, and it'll provide you the default package. There's also an option to modify if you're more apt to wanting to do something like that. But for our class purposes, you can just point and click through the default basic RStudio and download that. Once you've downloaded that, and I'm going to cancel this to save memory. You'll go to RStudio and you'll click RStudio and you'll get something that looks like this. Now, because I've been using it and I have set it up for different webcasts videos in terms of different things that we're going to be covering in R, you see these different syntaxes. But what you'll see when you open up R for the first time is an untitled 1 syntax. This is where you can write in syntax and then save it and then be able to reuse it, meaning that when I open up RStudio again and open up this R syntax, I don't keep have to writing it out over and over again. So if you're familiar with like syntax in SPSS or SAS or Stata, it's the same thing. It's just sort of a different language, but the concept is there that you're going to write it one time, save it, and then be able to use it when you open up different sessions. Conversely, if you write everything in the console, it's not gonna save for another session. And usually the things that you write in the console are like things that you need to check and you don't want saved in the syntax file. So like maybe, checking to see how many observations or the observations loaded correctly. You might not want to put that into the syntax if you want to just run the syntax with the output that you need for whatever. Because if you start doing all the check syntax in there as well, you can end up with 20, 50, 90 pages of output. We'll get to that later. So in that case, what we'll end up seeing here is the syntax, the console, and the console is where the output comes out of unless you're using R Markdown. And we'll see in a next segment on R Markdown how that works. You'll also have the global environment here. The global environment is where you're going to have your data sets are going to be loaded. Any variables that you create, temporary variables, meaning that they are loaded on R, but they're not connected to your data set. That will be in the global environment as well. And then you can also see the history, so like different past commands, syntax commands that you call up in the present session, in the previous sessions, will pop up unless you delete it with the brush here. And then if you want to highlight a previous command, you can put it to the console, or you can put it to the source syntax, and it will be there. You don't have to, write it over again unless you've deleted the history. For any of you who are interested in using databases connected to R, you can use connections here and then end up connecting to a database. You'd have to, set up your password and username for that database depending on what it is. The ODBC is your common normal relational databases. For any of you who plan on going into computational methods and want to take DSC 555, the big data with Hadoop and AWS, the Amazon, then you'll be using Spark, which is a non-relational database where you don't have to have a primary key. And so you can use that and connect it with R and do commands via that way for like SQL pools and things of that nature. Then in the files, at this point I have it at the home page, so these are all the files in the home page on the computer I'm using. I can delete and rename within the folder. Then plots, and at the moment I have it on the home folder. That might not be the working directory that I want to use, and we'll see that in the next segment when we cover the exercises on the matrices. That we'll be able, when we set the working directory, we're going to change this home to a different directory. So, and we'll see how that works. And then in plots, all your graphics are going to be in the plots unless you're doing an R markdown, and then it'll show up in the R markdown instead. As I said in class, packages, you're going to start out with a certain set of base packages. And then from there, any packages that you install onto the computer, or I should say install onto R, will be here along with all the other packages. Now, as you see here, you can install, update, and also archive, get rid of packages that you don't use often. So they've updated this to now include these, so you don't have to sort of do more of the drop-down menu. You have buttons or icons that you can just press and have that done. Case in point would be that if I wanted to install a package, I would normally have to go to Tools, Install Packages, and then type in the package and go so on so far. But here you can click the icon and it automatically gives you the install packages. The same is for updates. So it's always good to check updates. I'd say in the last a year, 6 months definitely to a year, have been providing a lot of different updates. I just recently updated, and these are 2 new ones since then. So you would check the packages you want to update, click Install Updates, and then it's going to run through the process of installing it. And then whenever I need to use it, I would just take, say, the library of that package, and we'll cover that when we cover the matrices. Then in the help section, this is what I was telling you about, where let's say I don't recall what syntax I need to use for correlations. So if I type in correlation, in the help section, it's going to give me vignettes, so examples of how to do this, where it provides the R code and different packages that I can use. And as you can see here, there is a lot of different packages that are available. As I said before, because it's open source, a lot of different people have created individual package for their individual needs and then want to share it with the community, so they don't have to, struggle to create their own packages of something that's already been done. So as you can see here, any package that has correlations in it is listed through here. And as you can see, the conical correlations that we're going to be talking about in week 4, they're provided here as well. So in this case, it takes some knowledge to sort of know what you need to use it for in terms of knowing what package. And that just comes through practice of using these packages and, trial and error in terms of determining that. But most of the examples in class will be providing you in terms of the material that you need, in terms of the functions and packages that you need to know in terms of to do those processes. I'll also provide you some cheat sheets in terms of how to do data processing, but I won't focus on that per se in detail in class because there's just so much other things to cover as well. So in this case, if I was doing correlations, then let's say for linear regressions, then I'd want to do the core plot. And so in here then, it would tell me, if I click on here, core plot and all the different options that I have in order to make the core plot. They'll explain what those options are, and then they'll also provide examples of how to run this. So how to use different colors and how to do different options with the core plot. And actually, I think this is more extensive to what they used to have. So this update has been really providing a lot more information. So in that case, that's what you can see in terms of the main functions here. So your main go-tos are going to be your syntax, your console, your global environment to make sure that your data is all loaded in there correctly, the help to understand the options available, make sure that your packages are installed. Once they're installed, but in order to activate that package to use the functions, you have to use the library function. And then also plots unless you're using R Markdown. Okay. Other things to know in here. So if I want to put in a new syntax, then I can go to RScript. They've also started something new they've added in the last couple of versions, what is called R notebook. And so in this case, you can end up creating a notebook. It's sort of similar to R Markdown in that way. Shiny, if you want to do a web dashboard. Text files, if you don't want to save it as R, you want to save it as a text file. If you want to compile it with C++, you can do that. Other things that are really common now are also using HTML presentations and then documentation files. In this class, I'm just going to be focusing on the R syntax and R markdowns. And if you wish to use notebooks, you can do that too. It's sort of similar to it's sort of like a combination of R R syntax and R markdown. Okay. Other things to know in here, if you want to open up previous syntax files that you've saved, you can do that here with the folder. The save files. So if I wanted to save this, untitled one, I could go to save, and then I could say where I want to save it to. If I want to save all these files that are open, I can do that as well, and it'll save them all. That helps if you already have them named. Otherwise, it can get a little bit complex that way. Now, so the most recent RStudio has provided some add-ons in here as well. There have been a lot of requests from our users, particularly from the social sciences. Are there, to have code books, be able to look at code books. And so they've created some add-ons for code books. And then they've also provided an access point from Data World. So Data World is a relatively new website that has been providing access to data that people have put up online for public use. It's not like Kaggle in terms of having competition data sets that then become possibly for public use, but it's people who have done research, and then once they've done with that research, they publish or upload the data to Data World for public use, usually academic and just research purposes, for other types of research purposes as well. So that's a recent add-on there as well. So those are the main buttons up here on the toolbar. Then you're going to have a run feature. That's where you're going to execute the commands in your syntax. And then if you want to rerun previous code that was highlighted, you can do that instead of having to highlight and run again, which is also sort of a similar new feature there. And then also going to source documents in order to see the syntax. In the file section, you're going to have, if you want to get a new file, so a new R script, you can hit R script, and you might have to browse around to the folder that has your R script in it, but you can do that and all the different ones that you've saved. You can open a file. I'm sorry, the new file is if you want to create all of these new ones. Open file would be finding your saved previous syntax file. Any recent files that you've saved, you can also go through here or use the folder on the icon toolbar. If you want to import a data set, you can do that through the file as well, and it's a little bit more point and click than necessarily using syntax. That can sometimes be helpful, and it looks like they've added on for how to do it with SPSS, SAS, and Stata. These particularly like Stata and SPSS sometimes gave trouble, so they've now created add-ons where it will make it easier to do that. In general, if you're still having problems in importing an SPSS, SAS, or Stata file, you can always go into those actual statistical programs, export it as an Excel file or a text file, and then read it into RStudio or Python or other types of programming that you're trying to use it for. Sometimes that can save some of the problems when there's compatibility issues between how labeling and how data features of one program are read into another program. Then we have the save as, save all, sort of similar to the features that we've had before. The knit document is going to be important for when we do our markdown. Also, if you wanted to print anything or close anything. And there is also a new feature from the last several versions before about using projects. That's sort of more of an intermediate to advanced concept, so I'm not going to cover that here and sort of boggle all that down, but that's something that you can investigate on your own once you've had a better handle on using R. And then in terms of edit, you have your typical sort of like Microsoft type things. You can go back, undo, redo, cut, copy, paste, clear output, clear all output. If you need to do find searches so that you can just switch out certain things in syntax and do replace and find, you can do that instead of trying to scroll through the syntax. Also in terms of like find in files, if you're not just looking in one file, you want to look at all the files that you have open, you can do a search find that way as well. And then also clearing the console, which will clear everything in the console here, which you can also do with the brush here. So let's, like with the updates, if I wanted to clear it, I could hit the brush and it would all go away. The same thing would be with the environment to delete a data set, which you can also import through here as well, instead of doing the file and going through. With the history, I can also delete, and they'll ask you, do you want to permanently delete it? And you can say yes, and so that'll be gone. And then in terms of code, if you want to insert a section of code, you can use insert section. This will be helpful when we cover like R Markdown, so I'll save some of this for later. View, so if for some reason you lose the console or you lose the plots, you can say show plots. So let's say if I hid this, I can go through here. But you can also make sure to zoom in and zoom out for like plots. If you need to switch tabs between plots or around different files, the show the history, which is here, show files, show your plot, show packages, which is over here. So all these different tabs. Now you also see next to these the shortcuts. So this is the shortcuts that they have instilled for these different ones. You can also set the panes. So maybe I can say I don't want the console on the left, I want it on the right. It'll switch it over to be on the right. So instead of being down here, it's up here. Unfortunately, I'm one of habit, so I'll probably say that I want it on the left just because it's right underneath the syntax and a lot easier that way. Okay, and so those are all the different viewing fields there as well. If I don't want the toolbar, I can hide it, but it's really nicer to have the icons there, so I'll show the toolbars. Plots, if I had a plot in this field, if I wanted to do next plot, previous plot, and all these different options, I can do that. These icons here are for moving between different plots, zooming in and out of the plot, exporting the plot as an image or a PDF, or copying to a clipboard, and we'll see that as we go through our code for the examples for problem 5 next class. And then you can delete plots and delete all of the plots. So all those options are in here as well if you don't want to use the icons. In terms of a new session means that I want a whole new RStudio to pop up. So it'll be something like this. And so it won't put a new file, it'll put a whole new R file in there. So then if I wanted to terminate a session, which I'm not going to do because I'll have to start all over again, it will close, it'll terminate R in terms of running a process. So if you stall out, say it's taking too much memory to run something, or it's sort of the syntax breaks, you can terminate R. If you do an installation and you need update that requires a restart of R, you can do that here. You can set working directories here. We'll talk about that later when we start looking at the matrices. Loading workspaces. So if I want to keep my files in the environment, so this is a global environment, or I can, different packages that I have that have data sets, I can select those, and they'll show me all the data sets that are in the packages I have installed so far and their functions. Okay. The global environment is the stuff that I'm using. If I want to save it, then I can go to session and save the workspace, and then when I reopen the session later on, or open a new session, I can then go to load the workspace, and I don't have to install all those data sets again. And so we'll cover that later on as well. You can also clear a workspace, and then obviously if you want to close R, you can quit a session. Building is going to be if you want to build your own package, and so that's an advanced concept. So if you create shortcut type of syntaxes and you want to create it into a package and then upload that package to R, you can do that using the build configure tools. Also in terms of debugging and issues with helping with debugging your errors, you can that's what this is going to be used for. And then you can also create profiles. That is more of an advanced concept as well, so we won't focus more on that. I've talked about install packages and checking updates for packages. So that's in here, those two icon buttons here. And then version control, if you want to create a package, if you want to create a project and you're working with different individuals as well as wanting to keep track of your different versions, you can create a version control project set up there as well. If for any reason that you needed to use C commands in a shell, let's say for like a SQL or things like that, or connecting with Spark or something with AWS, you can have a shell command here. And then you can also come up with a terminal, and it'll show you the terminal in here in terms of setting that up, and that also goes into like if you're doing database connections and things of that nature. Okay, then you can also reach the add-ons that we were showing in the toolbar here. And then the other thing that's very helpful is the shortcuts. There is a long list of them here. So if you want to learn all the different shortcuts, you're going to go to Tools, Keyboard Shortcuts Help, or Alt-Shift-K, and it'll pop up all the different shortcuts for the main types of commands in our base. If you want to see all shortcuts, they'll give you an HTML version that you can save in your notebook and or in your bookmarks, I should say, and then refer to it later. If you want to change the shortcuts, then you can go to modify keyboard shortcuts, and then make the changes that you want to in terms of what shortcuts you want to use, or if it doesn't have a shortcut, you can create a shortcut and things of that nature. Okay, so then for the help section, the R help is the help here. Other things, if you need to cite RStudio or know what version you're using, you can go to About RStudio, and it'll tell you you're using version, this is the latest version, 1.1.463. And then it'll tell you all the different licensing information here But primarily what's helpful is knowing what the version is, particularly if you need to cite this for a publication. Then you want to check for updates to see if there's new versions of RStudio. You would go to check updates. I just updated to the newest version, so it's telling me you're using the newest version of RStudio. If you hadn't, then it'll say you're using this. Would you like to update to the new version R 1.1 blah blah blah? And then you would say yes, and then it would exit out of RStudio, install. You would go to RStudio, download the newest version, and then when you go through the installation process and select RStudio again, it would give you the updated version of RStudio. Anytime that you need information, you can go to RDocs, and I'll show you that in a second. RStudio community forum if you have questions. Also, if you want to see if you have issues, it might already be a question in the community forum, so you can get a fast answer that way. As well as Studio, not so much Studio supports. Studio supports more for like developing packages and more for like the more commercial professional side. The other thing that's helpful here is the cheat sheets, which I'll show you an example of some of the common ones. And then in the when I do the next segment on R Markdown, I'll show you the R Markdown sheets and reference guides. And then also you can look at diagnostics if you want to do a log, sort of like SAS in terms of all the things that you've done. You can do that as well. So going to the R documents, if you click the R documents, it'll bring you up to a page here that looks like this. And so it'll provide you information on Studio Package Manager. So if you're dealing with servers for SQL databases, building your own packages, how to get started with connecting configurations, which is a little bit more advanced concepts here. Servers, Shiny packages for dashboards. In the next segment, we'll cover R Markdown. So there's good information here. And then how to use presentations, how to install. This is the Pro for the sort of the more commercial package, which I think they're also offering a free downloadable temporary version. So you can look into that as well. And if you're doing something for like a dissertation or publication and you need to use LaTeX options, the Sweave and KnitR are here to help you with that. So for the most part, outside of R Markdown, these might be more intermediate to advanced concepts than you would need right now. But the other thing I wanted to show you is the here we are, the RStudio cheat sheets. So I'll be providing this website online as well to help you see what the common cheat sheets are. This is not all inclusive, it's just the ones that they've added onto their website. If you Google RStudio cheat sheets, other people have also come up with cheat sheets that you might find very helpful as well. So within these cheat sheets, the common important ones here are the data import, so how to read in different files. So if you don't want to use the install option and you want to obviously put this information into your syntax. Now the other thing to know is that when you import a file, and we'll talk about this more when we cover the syntaxes for problem 5 examples, you can do the install point and click. It will provide you the syntax that they use to import the data, and then you can copy and paste that into your syntax for future use as well. but also in terms of learning the different options and functions that there are for doing importing data, you can use the data import cheat sheet here. Common types of packages here, particularly ones that are used regularly, are tidyverse, readr. There's another one in here that they don't have, but we'll cover it in another cheat sheet. Haven, which is one of the common ones outside of foreign for using uploading these SPSS data and SAS packages. Read Excel for Excel files. So these two are common ones in addition to foreign for uploading different types of data. And then if you were doing any like NLP, natural language processing, and scrubbing different types of APIs, so like, you know, Facebook or Twitter feed, that sort of thing, or JSON data sets, you have these common ones down here. If you're doing databases like SQL or like Spark, you'd be using these types of things here. Okay. And a lot of the times it's based on, you know, the file that you need to use. Also like text files, you'll be using like read table or read CSV for comma delimited files. Once you get a type of file to import, you know, it's sort of once you get these different types of data sets, you learn how to use all these different types of import options. And just like in mathematics, sometimes there's more than one package or more than one function that will do the same thing. And it's sort of just figuring out which ones there are and which ones you prefer and does the job more accurately or easily, or, you know, more computationally well. So tidy and dippler are two very common ones for data transformation. So there is a long list of different functions in here that you can learn how to use. And obviously they don't provide all the options. That's when you want to go to the help section and type it in and sort of learn what all those different options are and what type of answers, the way you want to format those options. The other thing I'm going to provide online is a book called Data Wrangling with R. And that also provides a nice self-how-to in terms of learning how to deal with different types of data transformations and different scenarios that you might see. It's part of the Use R series from SpringLink, and so I'll provide you links for those as well. Then RStudio also came up with the data wrangling using both Dippler and Tidier. And so you can see how those work together as well for some of those data wrangling options. Other common things that once you get more familiar with R is how to use apply functions. So it'll originally show up like this, and then you'll open it up and it'll show you all the different apply functions that you can use. This is more of an intermediate to advanced once you get familiar with how to use it. These are very helpful for like macro functions, which any of you who go for job interviews, eventually down the road, they want you to become familiar of how to do using macros. Because instead of having to do 50 normality tests, you can create a macro that only uses one line. You ask what variables you want to run that test on, and then it'll run it for you instead of having to keep writing out all those lines of code. And then other things are looking at strings. So one of the nasty data cleaning is always how to treat strings. If you have spaces in there, it'll count as two different levels. If you need to replace strip spaces, do some cleaning in terms of perfecting all of that. These are different options for doing that. That's also covered with the Data Wrangling R book link that I'm going to be providing for you. And also there's dates. Dates and strings are the most time-consuming and buggy issues for getting ready for when you need to analyze data. So this is a good sheet in terms of how to change data formats, time formats. If you're doing anything in the medical field where you're doing a lot of survival analysis or time series analysis where you're doing a lot of dates and times, then this will also be very helpful that way. And then in terms of graphing, we'll cover this more later as well. But like I said, there's other cheat sheets that are out there that other people have created. So one of them is sort of this exploratory analysis. So once you're starting out, what things do you need to do? Load data, make data changes, transpose data, sort data, create plots. Obviously, this is not all inclusive. This is sort of just an example of the process of different types of exploratory things that you might need to do. And so that gives you a good read in terms of there. Other things that always are helpful in terms of is how to merge data, because a lot of times in data or in terms of the real world, you might not just be given one data set, or it's too massive to be in all one data set, and so you have to know how to merge data. Okay, other data sheets. This one is provided by RStudio, is the ggplot2. So there are base packages in library stats. There are already base type graphs. So there is like a function that's box plot, and so in the back end they've already written some of the general code to create a box plot. But if you want to get more technical in terms of changes that you want to make, or if you want to create more elaborate type graphs, then ggplot2 is where you want to go. And it's also things that companies are looking for. So for the class purposes, I'm going to be showing graphs using the base features, and then I'll create a ggplot2 so you can sort of see how it looks and how you can use it for ggplot2. So that'll be forthcoming for when we're doing the visualizations for problem 5 examples for that problem 5 homework assignment. And then the R graph gallery. So as I was stating in class, this is very similar to the D3 for Java, if you're familiar with that. And so people have created their own graphs. And so if you go to ggplot2 from the RF gallery, you'll see that you'll see all different types of graphs here. Marginal plots, annotations, how to deal with like text labels, things of that, all different types of things. And so sort of tips of how to deal with ggplot2. If you want to look at all the different types of graphs that are from R, then you can hit all graphs, and it will show you different types of graphs that have been created. And if I click on one of these, it's taking a while because I have a lot of files open. It will show you the graph, and then it'll also show you the syntax that they used to create it. So this was using ggplot. And then you can copy this, and if you want to use that type of style of graph for your work, you can copy it into your syntax and then modify it as you need to using your data set variables, your actual data set. changing titles and things of that nature. Okay, so that's the R graph gallery. Other things that are very helpful as well as the carrot package. So as I said in class, there's not always a lot of things that you can update with, I'm sorry, not update, to cross-validate in terms of multivariate statistics. There's a few things like regressions and linear discriminant, but other things we don't necessarily traditionally do training and testing for as we would in machine learning. But if you want to use machine learning in R, you can. And so what you'll be using is the carrot package. Okay. And then eventually down the road, if you want to create R code and then do more of creating your own R packages, this is a nice shorthand in terms of having the shortcuts, and then different ways to, version control, debug, and pointing out all the different types of features that there are in terms of R as well. And then here's an example of the RStudio support. I was just showing you sort of more intermediate advanced concepts. So once you get a handle in terms of how to use R and you want to expand sort of your knowledge in terms of what are the possibilities of R, you can look at all these different articles. And then back to the shortcuts. So that concludes the tutorial on sort of what are the basic functions of R, how to install R in RStudio. As we go through learning about matrices and regressions and visualizations for regressions and the further statistical methods that we cover in class, we'll elaborate more about the different libraries, functions within those libraries that you can use to look at the data. Okay, so that's all, and our next segment will be on how to read files for matrices, and then the segment after that will be on how to use R Markdown. Okay, so this ends this segment on how to open RStudio, data cheat sheets, and the different options, initial options that you'll need in order to run RStudio for your assignments.